Judith is the speaker today. She's very experienced enterprise architecture, and she's got a track record. She's been with the Public Investment Corporation for over 6 years. And she does have a master's in information systems from Unisa, and is also a PhD candidate. That's quite exciting. Previous experience, she's been at Alexander Forbes, and lots of work in the financial services industry, including Deloitte. She has TOGAF, Archimate, and Scrum Master certifications. So we're in very good and capable hands. And October, Judith is in Pretoria, and October is a very special month. Well, because of the jacarandas, of course, but also because Judith is celebrating 20 years in the IT industry. I'm also celebrating 20 years of driving, but that's not as significant as Judith's achievement. Yes, I got my license on my 18th birthday on the day, but that pales into insignificance into Judith's experience and her industry and academic achievements. So I think I used to be a lecturer at UCT, so I can talk for another 45 minutes, but it's not about me today, it's about Judith. So I think that I'm just going to hand over to Judith and allow her to begin her presentation. We will be watching the chat and the Q&A section, but I think Judith, do you want to take questions as they come, or do we want to save it for the end? What do you prefer?
I prefer if we can save them to the end. So please make notes and then we'll take them afterwards.
Okay, that's no problem. So Q&A section in the chat for the questions. You can post your questions there. I'll keep an eye on them. The other eye will be on Judith's presentation. And I think I'll mute and hand over to you, Judith.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, let me quickly start all of these ticky things that we need. Okay, I just want to confirm. Can everybody see my screen?
I confirm.
I can as well confirm.
Let's wait for the audience.
While we're waiting for the audience, thank you very much also from the Enterprise Architecture Special Interest Group. Thank you, Judith, for making yourself available for this very interesting topic. I think it's one of the topics that's been on our agenda for quite some time. And to actually get an understanding of how AI and cloud is going to disrupt the work we're doing in enterprise architecture. So I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting talk today that we're looking forward to. And I can see that a lot of people have confirmed they can see your presentation. So I'm also going to hand over to you, Judith.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. This enterprise architecture is something that has been quite close to my heart for a couple of years now. And I'm a firm believer that the field of enterprise architecture can bring a lot of value to companies, and no matter the size of the organization, because it's a different way of thinking. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is in terms of when we're talking about all of the latest digital disruption that is happening, artificial intelligence and cloud, although not new, you still have companies that are in the space of we are moving to the cloud. And what we need to do as enterprise architects or people working in the enterprise architecture space is that we have to start thinking differently on how to enable and use these new technologies in terms of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. So okay, this is not moving. Let me just reshare. Apologies for this. Okay, there we go. So what we're going to be talking about today in broad terms is understanding firstly why we need to have the shift in mindset that we need. And then also in terms of what new things we need to learn and embrace in terms of enterprise architecture going forward, and what impact that has in terms of the way that we do architecture. So moving away from monolithic big systems into flexible, more modular components. And then taking a look at what AI-driven governance can bring to the table for enterprise architecture. And then ending off with how this technology is actually bridging and closing the gap between business and IT. So the punchline for today's talk is that the strategic value of enterprise architecture has never been more critical. Enterprise architects must work closely with stakeholders to ensure that AI and cloud capabilities align with business goals and outcomes. And that's my quote. I laughed when I said to Morris, I put my name next to that. So if you're reusing that, please make sure that you do quote me. Because a lot of people in the industry and IT, you will hear them saying that, you know what, enterprise architecture has become obsolete. But when you think about what enterprise architects do, I'd like to compare them to the guy standing next to the commander on the battlefield, because the person that is sending the troops on where to fight and how to fight needs to know exactly what the layout is of where he is sending his troops. And that presentation of the layout of the battlefield is what enterprise architecture should do. And I firmly believe that no leader can manage if he doesn't know precisely what's going on there. So that's what we want to aim to achieve, to talk about today. Okay, so a bit of background. Artificial intelligence and hyperscale cloud platforms have really changed the way that people interact with technology. And the funny thing about this is it's changing so rapidly that what you used to today is gone tomorrow. If you think about most of your software as a service applications that people tend to consume in terms of their things on their personal phone, today you are using WhatsApp and your color blocks are blue, and tomorrow morning when you wake up, suddenly your color blocks are green and you've got 4 new buttons and you don't know what happened. So the rate of change in the technology space and how quickly things are adapting and evolving means that we need to have a completely different mindset on how we integrate all of these things. And that change of pace and adapting to that very quickly is going to make us stay relevant as enterprise architects. So with that background, let's move a bit over into understanding why we need to have this shift in mindset that we have. Now, a lot of people will completely disagree with a few of the following statements, but I hope it's thought-provoking. If you look at what we call traditional enterprise architecture, it's a very structured approach in terms of creating the blueprint for your business. We start off with a vision, a goal, what we want to achieve. We clearly define the parameters. And then we move on understanding the business, precisely how they currently operate, what they are using, what's in the toolbox, what data are they generating. And then we go and look for things that we possibly might want to change. And then we go through this entire cycle again because we want to do the to-be. So where are we going? And then to make sure that we manage the change and everything that goes along with it, we say, okay, we're going to do certain architecture transitions. So a lot of techie talk, we do the as is, we do the to be, we transition. The problem is that that is a very waterfall-based approach. And it becomes this cyclic flow of a tick box. Yes, you can do one or the other and move it around, but the basic concept is that it's very rigid and you can't move on to the next block if you haven't done the previous one. So that was where we started. Then we moved over and we said, okay, you know what? Everybody's going agile. right? If you're in IT and you haven't heard Agile, Agile's been around for the past 15 years, even longer if you think about the manifesto. But people are still trying to grapple with what is Agile in IT. So the most common meme that I've seen the past few weeks is someone that says, oh, we implemented Agile, and they said, yes, we did. It's like, okay, be honest, you just took waterfall and you broke it into sprints. And that's where the common misconception is around Agile, because what is agility actually? And along with people who manage to get to a point where they are more agile and value is being delivered quicker to the client, now have some very unpredictable things happening from an enterprise architecture perspective when people are implementing these sprints. Because where we used to have our 2B and our transition architecture, now people are sprinting, and suddenly the entire plan has changed. So that's another thing that's making it really difficult for enterprise architecture, and why we need to change, because people are not working in this slow methodological manner anymore. Then, to add insult to injury, we've had these cloud things happening. Now, cloud has been also around for a long time, but where initially we shifted from having our servers on-prem, we're de-risking the environment, we're handing over the infrastructure to people to manage for us. Cloud in itself has changed over the past 2 to 3 years to a manner which it's become extremely set. So previously, if you were looking at designing a system before all of these great big servers we had, you had to do some SQL algebra in the background for the people who can remember those days, because you only had so much CPU and memory, and there was no more slots in the server itself to put more RAM. So a lot of thinking and engineering went into the design of the system and the infrastructure, and there were meetings and meetings upon what is the best configuration that you could possibly get for optimum system performance. Nowadays on cloud, they've said to you, well, you know what, you can just plug and play because we've pre-built everything for you. It is as easy today to say, okay, you know what, I want to host a website in the cloud, and within 3 ticks, everything is provisioned and you're ready. You don't even have to worry about setting up the service accounts in the background, because I don't think people even know what service accounts are nowadays. Then, to make it even worse, these little AI bots also arrived. So previously, where we needed an entire IT department to release a brand new website for us, someone in business can now open up ChatGPT, ask them to write a beautiful website, and pops out the code for you in like 2 seconds. Copy and paste that over to whatever web hosting platform you have, and suddenly there is a brand new website. So if you think about how rapidly people can fire technology and get some form of value out of what they are getting, the question of why is EA still necessary, isn't it obsolete, becomes really relevant if you look at it in the problems that we just discussed. But what we really need to talk about is, what do we have to change in order for us to, well, stay relevant and be on top of the game? So from my personal experience, and this has been an ongoing topic with a few of the EAs that I've been engaging with, is that we need to start changing the narrative and the way that we speak about the skill sets that we have. So you will hear people talking about, we need to move from on-prem to the cloud, and the cloud was singular. And the moment you were in the cloud, you were good. But from a design and a blueprint perspective, if you look at the business from a strategic view, yes, we moved to cloud. And the question is now, okay, so what? Well, now we have to start thinking about multi-cloud designs. And not necessarily in the sense that I've got 2 to 14 different service providers, each of them in a different cloud, and I need to integrate them with each other. But also looking at failing over from one cloud to the other. Because from a business continuity, security, governance perspective, would you actually really want to put all of your basket, well, your data and your services with Microsoft? Or do you want to be able to automatically fail over from Microsoft to AWS? So we have to start differentiating and changing the narrative in terms of what capabilities we need to enable for the business. The second thing that we need to do is we need to start thinking about design in an iterative fashion. Now, typically, if you talk about design, the thing that you want to do is you want to understand what drives value for your customer, be it the CEO of the company or someone that is using some of your services externally in the public. Now, perceived value is an interesting thing, because from the consumer endpoint, is it really the value that is derived from what we expect? For example, if you were to put down a mobile application for someone to interact with your business on a day-to-day basis, you as an internal person might be experiencing a lot of slowness because of legacy systems that you have in your platform. But for the person who has to sit on a call center line for 3 to 4 hours, that's an immense win if they can open up an application and see what they have to do. So the perception of value and the iteration in the design cycle becomes really important, because what we tend to do is we say, okay, this is what will provide value and that's where we stop. But we have to take it a bit further and also look at the different viewpoints in terms of what the value actually is and what we perceive as the value which we are delivering. The next thing is a bit of a controversial one, is that we have to become AI literate. And this is not only so that we can embed AI in the different architectures and systems and processes that we design, but we also need to start embracing it in terms of the work that we do and the output we deliver, because it allows us and frees up time. Instead of reading 14 papers from different publishing houses on what is the best way to implement an ERP system, you might just as well ask your AI buddy and say, okay, what is the stumbling blocks and the things that we need to do? And that frees up some time in bringing in the more creative element in terms of the design function that we perform. And if you look at all of this, it means that as an architect, you have the capability to change the value that you are bringing. So instead of saying, you know what, you need a design function, we are here, everything's going to work perfect. What you're now saying to your business partners and your stakeholders is that the value that enterprise architecture brings is understanding your strategic viewpoint, and then also moving over onto how we can quickly and more faster to market deliver precisely what we need. Now, this means that when we change that value proposition, we also have to start thinking about what is in our toolbox and using that differently. So, new trend in most of the things that we see is that platforms, monolithic systems are really moving out. They're still there. They're still quite popular in some instances, and they have merit where they need to fit. But what is happening with all of this technology and change in AI is that businesses tend to focus on a particular niche or a service. And they say that this is the one thing that we can do, and we can do it really well. So if you start looking at the building blocks of the things that you need to put together for your business, you will see that most architecture papers are now emphasizing your user experience and how to quickly bring up capabilities and components using agile design. Meaning you typically don't have full ERP-based system suites that you get now, but you have a very small company, a source provider that is saying, you know what, I can do budgeting really, really well, and this is what I bring to the market. And then they also come and they say, okay, we come with pre-built connectors in terms of this is the API stack. And it really does become this kind of plug and play modular architecture that you have. And the more you put into this fabric of building blocks that you have, the more flexible you become, because there's room for improvement. And it also means that changing one component in favor of another one becomes simpler, because it's just that in the surrounding that needs to change, but not the entire underlying platform. It also means that the architecture moves from this very static thing that lived on paper and it was to be, and we are working towards this, that the architecture in itself becomes living and changing as the components flex in and out in terms of what they need to do. If you add on that most cloud people have got connectors into basically every other cloud service, and the artificial intelligence that sits on top of this, means that what our users are able to do today versus what they'll be able to do tomorrow is completely different. Now, this means that we have to strike a balance between all of this flexibility, because it's really nice and it's really cool, and everybody is very excited about being able to do everything for themselves. But it's also our function to ensure that the architecture and the business blueprint and the strategy which we are working towards remains stable at its core and resilient. So it means that typically where we were focusing on enabling system capabilities for a particular process, we now also have to shift in putting down the building blocks or the platforms to support the different modules. So if we want to enable a new system or a new module, yes, they host their own APIs, but that's typically where you now have to start architecting in terms of having an API or a mediation layer. From a data perspective, you're looking at building in your data mesh nodes on your different data lakes that we have. And the moment that you have these things in place, your architecture is stable at its core, but it is also flexible in terms of allowing you to switch components on and off. And this is something that I think a lot of people are not focusing on at this point in time, purely because of this new shininess that the market currently has and brings for everybody. Because, oh, there's a new application. Yes, we're going to onboard it. We're agile. We can put a system in place in the next 3 to 6 weeks. We are doing extremely well. But we have to also refocus and build this platform for us to be able to do that. So I think that is something that a lot of people need to shift their focus more towards, so that we can do this properly in terms of that. So having this base that we have and these different smaller components and modules then allows us to actually truly become agile in terms of not only the service delivery, but how our architecture works. Because this means that if you have your architecture at the correct granularity, whether it's at your strategic level, your solution level, or even your implementation level at the bottom, you can plug and play and remove the components as and when necessary in terms of what needs to be done. Now, this is all very good and well, but AI is a thing that scares a lot of people. And to be honest with you, when it started coming out, I also was very skeptical, because yes, these things can think now and they're clever. But in terms of artificial intelligence, it's extremely useful for the work that we do if it is used within the correct guardrails. So a lot of people are talking at this point in time on artificial intelligence and how it can be embedded in systems and all of the benefits that it brings. But I also wanted to spend some time in terms of, from an architect's perspective, if you start adopting AI in your own practice, what would be the value that you will be getting from this? So one of the first things that I myself struggle with most of the time when having conversations with my stakeholders in terms of what do you actually want to see, where do you want to go, is that they very much sometimes do not know the data that they generate. So they've got an idea about an entity or a person or something in that line, and they kind of know where they want to go and where they want to see. Then you start asking them, okay, but where do you get this data? So, no, this is in this report. So you become this person hunting a piece of data in a jungle of things that are huge. Now, this is where artificial intelligence can really help and assist you. If you're saying to things, okay, this is our big data lake, I want to try and find this piece of data. Where does the master record sit? It also gives you a lot of capabilities to perform analysis on your system usage and metrics data. So while it's very good in predicting the analytics for future, if you have 14 systems and you have to analyze the user trends in terms of what is happening where, because we are running a strategic rationalization project, having the metadata around the users' usage of the system, where they're actually using things, also becomes an important conversation piece when you're going back to the people that you're servicing to say, yeah, you know what, we have got 14 systems, but did you know that people only log into this one once a month? In terms of predictive analytics for architecture planning, this one was an interesting find. Do you know that ChatGPT is extremely good at developing project plans? If I was a project manager, I would be really, really worried at this point in time. But if you say to AI, this is our strategic goal, quickly go and define a roadmap so we can get from a SAP-based ERP system to a web-based one. It writes that roadmap in about 5 minutes, and it's comprehensive, 10 to 15 pages if you allow it, because it's really verbose. But that allows you to take the input from that and apply mine in terms of how you're going to change things, so that makes it better. It also takes your designs. It's very opinionated about user experience, for example. And it will tell you, perhaps, look at this font, it's not big enough, even doing your disability analysis when you're doing the designs. Web pages need to have things where people who are hard of hearing can actually have the website speak to them. Now, the other thing is, and this is something that I hope there's no people in the audit realm on the call, because this is interesting. It also allows you, from an architecture perspective, to do compliance monitoring in terms of your standards and principles that you have. So if you are very strict in your security architecture space, you want to apply the principle of least privilege, you can now actually say to AI, the moment that someone's permission level changes for some or the other reason, please alert me. You can also start tracking how many of these compliance breaches or principle breaches are happening, which will show you the relevance of certain principles, because we sometimes do principles and we think they will be very good, but they end up being discarded because there's something that we did not really think about. In terms of writing documentation, AI is absolutely brilliant. And if you start saving your enterprise architecture artifacts into data lakes and things like that, it also starts building up the necessary intelligence for you to be able to say, this writing of a position paper for us to approve a cap change, please go and start doing that, because it now knows where to go and get the approval of the design, the minutes, the meeting of the architecture review board. So a lot of the menial admin tasks also can get automated in terms of artificial intelligence and how we use it there. Now, everybody speaks English in some shape, way, or form, either that or French or Mandarin, but those are the three common ones. But it's very seldom that you find people who have English as their primary mother tongue. That means that when sometimes I think my mother language is running in my head and then I'm speaking English, and even if I use the words 100% correctly as they are depicted and explained in the dictionary, there always seems to be this kind of gap in communication. Now, artificial intelligence is very, very good at explaining things in different manners. So you can go and write a prompt and say, okay, but you know what, rewrite this, make it more formal because it needs to go to the CEO. Rewrite this in academic language because it needs to go to the auditors. They're very strict in terms of planning. You can say, write it more casual because this is actually the fun invite that we're going to be sending out to our IT department after we celebrate landing this new module that we have. So it allows you to start tailoring the communication that you have with your different stakeholders for how they want to consume what you are trying to tell them. It also now is becoming very clever in the sense that you can do scenario analysis in terms of, okay, what ifs. Now, one of the things that in my enterprise architecture life I really, really struggle with is when you are talking to people and you're saying to them, you know what, enterprise architecture, we've done the research, we spent hours reading books upon books, and we really think this is the way that we should be going about this. And then someone would look at me and say to me, okay, but why? And then you explain and you try a different way and you use your AI and you change the way that you say things and you still get this, yeah, but why? I don't agree with you. And in this realm of feelings entering facts in terms of this is the way that some people would prefer to implement things versus the other way that other people think they should be implemented, it really causes a bunch of friction, especially sometimes between enterprise architecture and the techie guys, but even more so sometimes between enterprise architecture and the business, because the two worlds tend to not understand each other. And yes, we are there to preach it for them, but they sometimes do not really understand where we are going. Now, with the enhanced decision-making support and the different modeling tools that you have, you can now start programming scenarios with artificial intelligence and say, okay, we have got 2, 3, 4, 5 opposing camps or 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities and solutions that we want to implement. Let's play out the scenarios virtually and see where we end up and which ones would be the best one for us to take. Some of the results that we've seen using this process is quite interesting. We've had some upset people in the sense that what we thought was going to happen did not really pan out that way. And it also gives you the ability to counter for surprises which might come along, because we don't always think about everything, even though we try to. Then the last one, well, not the last one, but an important one, is to also continuously monitor the issues that we have in the environment. Now, a lot of people say to me, oh, but your infrastructure teams and your software development teams have got all of their monitoring in place. The moment the website is down, everybody gets a WhatsApp and they're on it. But this could also be expanded in terms of the use from a process level in a business perspective. So if you're looking at your process design layer in terms of your business architecture, sometimes people tend to get stuck in a certain step in a process and you're not really sure why, because the system might be designed correctly, it might be working, it passed all of your unit tests and UAT and everything that you had. But that experience that is happening also needs to be monitored and checked, because a lot of the time people will not come to you and say to you, I don't like your system, or this is not working for me. And the ones that do, because they are few and far between, and they really don't want to criticize all of these nice things that IT do, they tend to be labeled as, yeah, that's a difficult user, especially when they say to you, the system is not user-friendly. And I think any technical person who hears that immediately gets a headache, because that's not where we want to sit. And lastly, AI-driven collaboration and stakeholder identification. This is quite an interesting one. So we spoke about some of the administrative tasks that AI can help you with. But in terms of your architecture book of work, scheduling meetings, sending reminders to people who owe you pieces of information, and even when you are sitting in a meeting and the transcript runs in the background, somebody will say, you know what, you have to go and speak to so-and-so in that department. So having that AI component in your day-to-day work also allows you to more effectively collaborate and remember when things need to be done. Now, if we start bringing in these tools and we start getting closer to our business counterparts, it means that we're now finally getting to the value proposition that we wanted. I said earlier, the gap between IT and business is narrowing day by day. And the reason for that is because every day, everybody now today is a techie. You can pick up your phone, and if you've got a few smart plugs, you can say to your app on your phone, if you pick up my Bluetooth signal, it means I'm close enough for the garage door to open automatically. And suddenly you've got a smart home. The other thing that is also becoming quite easy is this low code thing that's happening. So people can now start developing their own small apps. And this thing about citizen development is now really becoming a thing. So the more you use your technology in the space around you, the more you are going to get going. So this means that as enterprise architects, we have to be really close to these people, because even though it's very easy, it's also very easy for them to become targets. And this boils back down to the core of the architecture space, which I spoke about earlier. But we also have this burden of care to ensure that the people that we look after know how to use the technology that we give them in an ethical manner, in a secure manner, which is governed. So we also have to start putting things in place to say, okay, if you want to go and develop your own application, Power Platform, I can't remember what the AWS counterpart is, but this is the space that you'll be doing this in. And this is what we've recommended. So if you want to use AI, you can't use ChatGPT, you have to go and use Copilot, because in the background, we've secured everything there. And the closer we get to each other in terms of this collaboration and the development that our non-IT people are doing, the quicker we will see what solutions they are coming up with. And that's typically where their pain points are, because the moment that people start automating things in their day-to-day job, that is where they're actually really struggling and have a problem with it. So the more we can take those types of insights and actually build it into the bigger architecture that we have, the platform that we have, the more our architecture practice becomes the basis of everything that the business does. And that's actually where I think as an enterprise architect you want to be, because it's like having this big brother or sister where you go to for advice. You know, you can make a mistake, you can know you can do something wrong, but there's always someone that's going to be there to say, don't worry, we've got you. And when you get to a point in time where you've now reached your ceiling or your skill set limit, there's always someone that says, okay, come on, we'll take it further for you. So that's my presentation for today. We can go over to questions.
Thank you very much, Judith. That was quite insightful. I'm receiving some feedback somewhere. But, right. So, are there any questions on the chat? I'm not seeing any. While we're waiting for that to happen, maybe the one thing that I can say is, you know, Judith, when you started with this, your whole presentation, the one thing that really stood out to me, and I'm a very big picture person, and I think that's probably why I'm an enterprise architecture, because you have to be a picture person to be an architecture. And I quickly had to go and search, but to find the latest, commander type games, and I can't believe the amount of ones that are available. But just thinking about Mortal Kombat, that's probably the only one that looks fairly familiar to me. But I'm just thinking about that picture in my mind when you said about how technology is changing our landscape. And if you are the commander in the battlefield, and I'm thinking of your executives, your managers, and things like that. How are they going to, if you just take the picture of something like Mortal Kombat, and there are always little men popping out of sides which you can't always understand, and that's sort of like the battlefield that are happening. And especially, as you said, IT and business is getting closer and closer to each other. How those little things are changing, and that commander needs somebody to actually help them navigate this field, that can actually understand the components and the relationships between all of them, and the role that an architect needs to play in that space to actually help this commander understand this field that constantly changes. And you can actually see how AI can play a key role in that. So I think that was a very good and insightful picture that you create of the commander, and I can just picture this little electronic little mannequins popping up everywhere to attack the commander and making their life difficult. But that changes the role of the enterprise architect in the organization. Do you see the role of the enterprise architect with all of this becoming more strategic or more down at a technical level? Where do you see the role of enterprise architect coming in?
It's an interesting debate, and one that I've spoken to with a few people about actually in the past week. It really depends on the piece of work and what you are asked to do. Because remember, you typically have to do the architecture where the value is needed. So if you have a commander that is very clear in terms of his battle plan and where he wants to go, yes, your strategic architecture will be there, but it will be very high level. If you see there are problems in terms of the technical space, you'll be moving more down into the solution role. But I don't think there's a clear delineation in terms of it's either strategic or technical. You have to be able to swap between the two and also support both of them. And I think a lot of times the two also don't talk to one another. So you really have to enable that communication between your different architecture layers as well.
Thanks for that. Anybody for a question? I'm not seeing anything coming through on the chat yet. It's definitely been, I think, Judith, you've created a very interesting environment. Maybe people are trying to think of, maybe they're all concerned about your last slide, and maybe that's the question I'll pose to you, and then we'll see if there's other questions coming through. But the question to you, I think your last comment that you made was, or the last thing is, do you think AI will replace enterprise architects in totality, that we're not going to be needed anymore?
I don't think so. I was having a conversation with someone in our business the other day, and we were talking about automated document authoring. In this case, actually legal contracts, because if you think about it, legal contracts are pretty much template-based. So we were talking about enabling the capabilities for AI to write a contract for you. And the response was like, oh, no, we can't do that because we're going to be completely replaced. I mean, AI can write a legal contract. And the concern was that, me being replaceable. So I said to this person, the human element will never disappear. What we need to understand and embrace is how we can use AI to make ourselves better. But an artificial intelligence piece of work that you are using can only use and consume what it has seen. It doesn't come up with new innovative ideas. So yes, we can take it as input and it takes away a lot of the grunt work, but there has to be the human element to say, yes, this is the way that we go.
Okay. No, thanks a lot, Judith, for the presentation. I see there are 2 questions now in the chat. The first one is from Dimitri. When mentioning AI on the slides, do you mean LLMs like ChatGPT or Claude? That's the first question.
Okay, it could be AI in any form, because nowadays AI also seems to encompass things like robotic processing, automation, or machine learning, and they've become quite blurry in terms of that. AI in the sense of the presentation is whatever you use. It could be ChatGPT, it could be Claude, it could be anything else that you have in your arsenal. Does that answer you, Dimitri?
Okay, we'll wait for Dimitri to respond. In the second question is it best practice to host OT information in the cloud, or is it more suitable for IT?
I think
you're going to have to.
Sorry.
Yes. Go, Maurice.
No, I just wanted to add, because I think what he's talking to, I wasn't sure if you understand the question, but it's more coming to, is it the operations technology, like for instance, in a place like, one of the mobile operators, their technology, moving that into the cloud, was it more the normal IT operations that the business wants, your ERP systems, etc.? Is it more suitable to move that in the cloud, or can we move the technology that like the mobile operators, the operations technology use into the cloud?
Well, that's a thought-provoking question. The presentation is aimed more from a business applications perspective, but I honestly have no experience in terms of that. I think it would be possible, but then also remember that your definition of cloud is something different, because we have people that host their own data centers, and then because the way that they set it up, it could also be termed cloud. So it really depends. In terms of mobile operators, if you think about Vodacom, I'm speaking under correction, they typically have their own data centers with their own servers in the racks. But if you consume the services even in their business, they talk about their own cloud. So I would be very wary of putting everything on the cloud, but I'm sure there are some of the components that you can upscale and raise, especially if you want to build in some form of redundancy.
Okay, I think Colofello confirmed that Marius explained the question correctly. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A section. So I think Colofello is saying thank you, and it does help. Thank you for the questions. I think we've got 55 people present, so thank you for the attendance. If there are no other questions, should we draw the webinar to a close?
I think we can.
Okay, then thank you everyone for attending. Hold on, here's a question.
Yes,
Farad, are there regulations in South Africa that govern data gathered through LLMs?
Okay, now the questions start coming in, and they're not the easy ones. It depends on the type of data. So if you are processing any personal identifiable information through, for example, Copilot, it's the one that I'm more intimately familiar with. Yes, there are laws that govern that. So if you think about the papaya data that we have, we actually have to go and build in rules into our own Copilot environment that says, while you can go and gather data from the internet and bring it inside, you're not allowed to share any of the information and things that we have outside. There's also a big security concern if you think about HR-related data. So if you have AI and you let it loose in your organization, what's stopping me from asking how much the CEO is earning, for example? So they are working on different regulations and acts. I know there's a joint standard that's currently being worked on by CETA. But even though they're not 100% clear and written in law yet, there are some that are currently impacting the data that we use through LLMs.
I think I've read a few responsible use of AI policies, company policies. And remember, if you go and post something and say, rework this, that data is being held by ChatGPT or whoever. So I think you should be careful how you use it. And maybe it's not the best idea to put proprietary information on there. And I think the regulations are coming. 20 years ago, you had people standing on the side of a mountain taking pictures of people on a boat, and we called that the price of fame. And sort of public gossip and all those things was called the price of fame. Now it's on your phone. It can happen to anyone. Things can go viral. So the regulations and everything and the laws need to change to compensate for technological advancements. It's going to be an interesting time. Okay, are there any other questions? Any other comments? There's a comment from Colafello that says the question from Farad was good, and those regulations should be shared in future. It will really assist. Okay, then I think if there are no other questions, I think we can bring the webinar to a close. Thank you everyone for attending. Usually the webinars are available on the IITPSA social media channels, the recordings afterwards. And yes, thank you especially to Judith for presenting and Marius for being the representative from the EA Enterprise Architecture SIG.